The night before everything fell apart, Rasheeda Frost looked calm. She smiled for the cameras, answered questions with her usual poise, and even laughed when a reporter mentioned Kirk's name. But just hours later, that same interview would explode across the internet, sparking rumors, tears, and one of the most emotional scenes fans have ever seen from the couple who built their empire on love, loyalty, and second chances. It started with one clip, a short shaky video from backstage where Rasheeda, thinking the cameras were off, was overheard saying, "I'm tired of being the only one holding this marriage together." Those words hit social media like a storm. Within minutes, fan pages, gossip blogs, and even former castmates began reposting the footage. Hashtags like #PrayFor, RASHEEDA, and #Team Kirk trended overnight. The internet was divided, but one thing was clear: something inside the Frost household had finally cracked. By morning, paparazzi photos surfaced showing Rasheeda leaving their Atlanta home with 2 suitcases, her wedding ring noticeably missing. Kirk was nowhere to be seen. Fans speculated everything from a staged storyline to a real separation, but the silence from both of them made it worse. People wanted answers, and they wanted them fast. When Kirk finally broke his silence in a trembling Instagram Live, the world saw a man who wasn't the calm, business-minded husband everyone knew. His voice cracked as he said, "Y'all don't understand. That interview wasn't what it looked like. I love my wife, and I'm not giving up on us." Tears welled in his eyes before he abruptly ended the stream. The comment section flooded instantly, some calling it damage control, others begging Rasheeda to forgive him. Meanwhile, Rasheeda's close friend and fellow castmate Carly Red hinted at the real reason behind the breakdown. "When you've been carrying someone for years, there comes a point when your knees give out," she posted on Instagram, followed by a broken heart emoji. Fans were stunned. What was she implying? Rumors grew wilder by the hour. Insiders claimed Kirk had been in secret meetings about a new business venture that excluded Rasheeda, despite her being the backbone of their joint brand. Others whispered that she had discovered private text messages that had nothing to do with business. And then came the viral moment that sealed it all, a leaked voicemail of Kirk pleading, "Don't do this, please. We can fix it." His voice sounded desperate, almost unrecognizable. That's when people realized this wasn't a publicity stunt. Something real was happening behind the cameras. As fans scrolled through their feeds, one question echoed everywhere: was this finally the end of Rasheeda and Kirk? After decades of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and rebuilding, could one interview be the final straw? Or was there something deeper, something the public wasn't supposed to see? The streets of Atlanta were buzzing, fans were dissecting every clue. And even the love and hip-hop producers reportedly paused filming until the couple decided what to do next. Insiders said Kirk was showing up at Rasheeda's store daily, trying to talk, trying to apologize, trying to hold on. But those close to her said she was done. Done fighting, done explaining, done being the strong one. The camera lights might have faded for the night, but the drama had only just begun. And by the time the next episode of this real-life heartbreak aired online, Atlanta would never look at the Frosts the same way again. The morning after the viral interview, the Frost household felt heavier than ever. The cameras weren't there yet, but the silence inside was louder than any argument they had ever had on Love and Hip Hop. Rasheeda stood by the living room window, scrolling through her phone as notifications flashed, nonstop blogs reposting the clip, fan reactions, comments calling her strong, heartbroken, and finally done. She didn't say a word. She just stared at her reflection in the glass, her eyes tired, her hand shaking slightly as she set the phone down. Kirk sat on the edge of the couch, watching her like a man who had already lost something he couldn't fix. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. She didn't turn around. "You said what you said, Kirk. People saw it, they heard it, and they believed it because it's true." He stood up, frustrated but trying to stay calm. "Rasheeda, it wasn't supposed to come out like that. I didn't even know they were still recording." She finally looked at him, her expression flat. "Does it matter? The truth came out either way." He tried to step closer, but she took a small step back. The distance between them felt bigger than the room. "We've been through worse," he said, voice breaking slightly. "We got through Jasmine, through the lies, through everybody talking about us. You really gonna let one video destroy everything we built?" Rasheeda let out a dry laugh, the kind that came from years of holding back tears. "One video didn't destroy anything, Kirk. Years of pretending did." Her tone cut through the air, leaving him speechless. Outside, the sound of cameras clicking echoed faintly. Paparazzi were already parked down the street, waiting to see if she'd leave again. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Carly Red. "You good, sis?" It read. Rasheeda typed back slowly, trying to be. Carly replied instantly, I got a room ready if you need to clear your head. For the first time in hours, Rasheeda exhaled. Maybe I do, she whispered. Kirk heard her and tensed. So that's what this is. You walking out. She looked around the house. The photos of them, their kids, the trophies, the brand awards. I'm not walking out, Kirk. I'm walking away from the version of us that doesn't exist anymore. She picked up her purse and her car keys, her voice steady but her hands trembling. I just need space. As she walked out, Kirk followed her to the door. Space turns into distance real quick, he said, his tone desperate now. And distance turns into forever. She paused for a moment, her eyes softening, but then she shook her head. Then maybe forever is what we need. The door closed behind her, leaving Kirk standing in the quiet. He sat back down, running his hands over his face, the sound of his own breathing filling the room. Moments later, he grabbed his phone and opened Instagram. Live viewers started pouring in instantly, thousands within seconds. Everybody wanna talk like they know what's going on, he said, his voice shaking. But y'all don't. Y'all don't know what it feels like to fight for something and still lose it. Comments flooded in. Stay strong, Kirk. You did her wrong. Fix it before it's too late. While Kirk's live spread across the internet, Rasheeda was driving. The Atlanta skyline blurred past her as she wiped away tears. She turned off her phone's notifications, but her mind couldn't silence the echo of his voice. She pulled over at a small park, the same one they had brought their sons to when things were good. She sat on a bench, staring at the water, replaying every moment, the first time they met, the first time they fought, the time she forgave him when everyone told her not to. It all came rushing back. How many times can love survive the same wound? She whispered to herself. A light breeze brushed her face, and her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother, Shirlene. I just saw the video, baby. Come by the house, the message said. Rasheeda sighed. She didn't want to face her mother yet. She knew what was coming. I told you so. She started the car again, this time heading to Carly's condo instead. When she arrived, Carly opened the door before she could even knock. Girl, the internet is losing its mind, Carly said, hugging her tightly. You okay? Rasheeda managed a weak smile. No. But I will be. Carly led her inside, poured her a glass of wine, and turned down the lights. So what really happened? She asked. Rasheeda hesitated. He made business moves behind my back again, said it was for the brand, but he kept me out of it. And now the interview made it look like I'm the one breaking everything. Carly frowned. Typical Kirk, always saving face for the cameras. Rasheeda nodded, tears finally spilling over. I'm just tired, Carly. Tired of being the villain in his version of our story. Meanwhile, back at the house, Kirk's phone rang nonstop. Yandi, Scrappy, and even Jock were calling. He ignored most of them until Jock texted, Bro, don't let her go. Whatever it takes, fix it. Kirk stared at the message before calling back. It's not that easy, he said when Jock picked up. She's really gone this time. Jock sighed. Then go after her. You think pride gonna keep you warm tonight? Kirk didn't answer. His silence said enough. After the call ended, he stood up and looked around the house again. Every wall, every picture reminded him of her. He walked into her closet half empty now, and that's when it hit him. She was serious. This wasn't a break. This was goodbye. The next morning, the story hit every major gossip site. Rasheeda Frost leaves Kirk after emotional interview. Insiders say couple on brink of divorce. The headlines were relentless. Kirk's team tried to reach out to spin it as a temporary separation, but Rasheeda's silence made it clear this wasn't for publicity. Even Erica Mena commented under one post, sometimes peace costs leaving the table. Fans flooded Rasheeda's page with support. One wrote, You've carried this for too long. Another said, Do what's best for your peace, Queen. But the most liked comment read, We love you both, please work it out. That one hurt her the most, because she knew deep down she still loved him. Love wasn't the problem, trust was. Late that night, Kirk showed up at Carly's condo. When Rasheeda opened the door, her expression hardened. How did you find me? He held up his phone. You forget, I still have your location. She sighed, stepping aside. You got 5 minutes. He stepped in slowly, his eyes red. I didn't come to fight, he said. I came to tell you the truth. She crossed her arms. You've told a lot of truths over the years, Kirk. Which one is this? He swallowed hard. I didn't mean to go behind your back. I was trying to build something that could take care of us long term. I thought I was protecting us. She looked at him for a long moment, her voice soft but sharp. You don't protect me by keeping secrets. You protect me by being honest. He reached out to hold her hand, but she pulled away. I can't keep living like this, she said quietly. Every time we take one step forward, you do something that drags us 3 steps back. His voice cracked as he said, then tell me what to do, I'll fix it. She shook her head. You can't fix something that's already cracked, Kirk. It just keeps breaking in different ways. He looked down, defeated. So what happens now? She whispered. Now, I heal. And you figure out why you keep losing me. He wanted to argue, to convince her, but she turned away, and that silence between them spoke louder than any words could. The 5 minutes were over. He left without another word, and as the door closed behind him, both of them knew something had shifted for good. Kirk didn't sleep. He drove aimlessly through Atlanta until the sky turned a smoky gray and the streets went quiet enough to hear his thoughts. By dawn, he was parked outside, pressed, staring at the dark storefront like it might answer him back. His phone buzzed with producer messages, long voice notes from a publicist, and a single text from an unknown number that read, "Check your email before noon, or this gets bigger." He opened the message thread and froze. There were screenshots, attached contracts, wire confirmations, an NDA with his signature, and a date from 3 months ago. His stomach dropped. Whoever sent it knew what he was hiding. Inside Carly's condo, Rasheeda sat at the kitchen counter with a blanket around her shoulders and an untouched cup of coffee. She had not cried since the door closed behind Kirk, and the stillness felt like armor. Carly scrolled through her phone and set it down with a sigh. Girl, fans are shocked. They're saying this is the end, for real. Rasheeda nodded without looking up. They always say that. This time the difference is I believe it too. A knock sounded at the door. Carly frowned, checked the peephole, and whispered, "Don't be mad." She opened the door to Charlene, who walked in like a storm with purpose. "I asked you to come to me," Charlene said, arms folded. "Instead, I'm here chasing you." Rasheeda stood, the blanket slipping. "I needed quiet first." Charlene's eyes softened, but only slightly. Quiet doesn't heal lies. Truth does. They sat. The air was thick with the weight of too many conversations never finished. "I saw the interview," Charlene said. "And I saw the bags. Are you staying or going?" "I'm leaving for now," Rasheeda answered. "I don't know if I'm coming back." Carly glanced between them, ready to defend her friend, but Charlene lifted a hand. "Let her speak." Rasheeda inhaled. "He keeps building things without me. I'm his wife, not a mascot. I'm tired of hearing 'trust me' and then reading the fine print after." Charlene nodded slowly. "A man who loves you should stand next to you, not in front of you, blocking your view." For the first time since morning, a small laugh escaped Rasheeda. "Mama, you always got a line ready." "Because I've lived this movie," Charlene said, "and I know the ending if the lead actress forgets she's the star." Just then, Carly's phone lit up with a live notification. "Oh wow," she murmured. "Somebody just leaked audio to the blogs." She tapped play. Kirk's voice spilled from the speaker, raw and pleading. "I'll bring you in later, I promise. Just sign off on the press for now." Another voice answered, slick and low. "Without her, the valuation is cleaner. The brand is the look, but the control should be yours." Silence, then a sigh that sounded like defeat. "Fine, send it." Carly's eyes widened. "That's him." Charlene's face hardened. "That's you being written out of your own life." Emotions ran high as the 3 women listened to the rest of the clip. The kind of proof that burned even when you expected the flame. The family was left divided, even in that living room, between anger and the ache of love that would not die. Across town, Kirk finally opened his email. The same audio file sat waiting like a lit fuse. Beneath it, a message. "We don't want to ruin you. We want her to know." He hit call on the number and got no answer. His hands shook. He typed back, "Meet me. Name the place." A reply arrived instantly. "Warehouse District, 11 a.m., come alone." He checked the time and cursed under his breath. He had 2 hours to decide whether to fight the fire or let it burn and hope the blaze cleared the deadwood. When the producers called, their tone hovered between concern and opportunity. "We can pause filming," one said gently, "or we can capture what's real while it's raw." Kirk almost laughed. "You mean capture me losing my wife in 4K? A beat of silence. Then the producer said, "Do you want to save your marriage or your image?" Kirk hung up. For the first time in years, he did not have an answer. By mid-morning, Prest had a line outside, and cameras across the street. When Rasheeda arrived with Carly and Charlene, fans cheered her name and shouted, "We love you, we got your back," and "Queen, Do what's best for you. Inside, employees hugged her tightly. We can close if you need, one whispered. No, Rasheeda said. We keep working. Work kept me sane when life got loud. She moved through the racks, touching new pieces. Straightening a mannequin's collar, reclaiming small corners of control. A young woman in tears approached with shaking hands. My mom left after 20 years, she said, voice thin. Watching you be strong helped me understand her. Rasheeda hugged her and felt the ground steady beneath her feet. This, right here, was the part of her story no contract could edit. The bell over the door rang again and the store went still. Kirk stepped in alone, no cameras, no entourage. Carly moved to the front like a guard, but Rasheeda raised a hand. It's okay. He stopped several feet away, voice low. I got an email with the audio. So did we, Carly said, sharper than a blade. You gonna say it's fake? Kirk shook his head. I'm gonna say I was wrong. He looked at Rasheeda, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I thought I was protecting the business, and I was really protecting my fear. I've been scared that if we did everything together, there'd be nothing that was mine if you ever left. The words hung heavy, Shirlene's eyebrows rose. So you planned for the exit while asking her to stay? Kirk nodded once, shame plain on his face. I did, Rasheeda's voice was steady. I never wanted your money, Kirk. I wanted your partnership. I wanted you to choose me in rooms I'm not in. He swallowed hard. I know. And yet you signed papers that erased me on purpose. He didn't try to deny it. I can fix the deal. You can't fix intention, she said. Only action. He took a breath and pulled a folded document from his jacket. I drafted a transfer. Full equity split on everything tied to the brand. Retroactive. I'll file it today. Carly snorted. A paper peace offering. But Rasheeda took the pages, scanned them, and then set them down. You always bring solutions when the building's on fire, she said. I needed transparency before the match got lit. A door at the back creaked and their son stepped out from the stockroom, eyes wary. I heard voices, he said, then froze when he saw both parents. The room shifted. The public drama became private again. He looked at Kirk. Is this about the audio they keep tagging me in? Kirk looked gutted. I'm sorry you had to see that. I didn't need to see it, the boy said, voice steady like his mother's. I've been living in it. That single sentence measured the damage better than any headline could. Kirk reached a hand toward him, but the boy stayed with Rasheeda. The family was left divided in a way that felt new, not by loyalties to rumors, but by memories of broken promises. At 11 a.m., Kirk stood in the shadow of a warehouse with metal doors and peeling paint, alone, as requested. A woman. He moved closer, scanning the page. This ain't what it looks like. Then tell me what it is, she demanded. Because it looks like you trying to build a life that doesn't include me again. Jasmine stepped back, not wanting to get caught between them. I said my part, she murmured. What y'all do with it ain't my business. She left quietly, and the door clicked shut behind her. Rasheeda's voice dropped. Do you even hear yourself anymore? Every time you say it's not what it looks like, it turns out to be exactly that. Kirk shook his head. You don't understand the game. Half of this industry is about how things look. Then maybe I don't want to play, she shot back. Maybe I just want a life that's real. Emotions ran high. Kirk tried to speak, but she cut him off. You begged me to come back. You cried on live, and 2 days later I find out you were already drafting my replacement. What else am I supposed to believe? His voice cracked. It wasn't like that, Sheeda. I thought you thought I'd never find out, she said quietly. Her calm was scarier than any scream. You've been chasing power so long, you don't even realize you lost love in the process. He stared at her, searching for something to hold on to, but the look in her eyes told him the answer before she said it. I'm done fighting for a version of us that only exists when the cameras roll. He reached for her hand anyway. Don't do this. Not like this. She pulled back. There's no other way. The bell rang again. This time, it was Carly, Yandy, and Jock together, their faces tense from whatever news they carried. The network just leaked the reunion teaser, Yandy said breathlessly. They're airing it like the final Frost chapter. She held up her phone, showing the preview, clips of the live, the audio leak, and even paparazzi footage of Rasheeda leaving the house flashed across the screen. The voiceover said, after years of scandal, forgiveness, and second chances, Atlanta's royal couple may finally be finished for good. The room fell silent. Carly whispered, they turned your heartbreak into an episode. Rasheeda closed her eyes, forcing steady breaths. Of course they did, she said. They always do. Kirk looked sick. I didn't approve that, he said. They can't air it without consent. Yandy shook her head. You both signed release extensions last season, remember? Carly put her phone down. The fans are already picking sides again. This is about to blow bigger than last year's baby rumor. Outside, a crowd had already gathered. Bloggers, fans, live streamers all waiting for a reaction. Flashes from phones lit up the windows. Inside, the tension was thick enough to hum. Kirk turned to Rasheeda one last time. You walk out right now. They'll write the ending for us. She looked at him, tears finally breaking through. Maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm tired of trying to rewrite something that was never ours to begin with. She walked to the back office, grabbed her jacket and a single duffel bag, and came back out without looking at anyone. I'm leaving the store to my team for now, she said to Carly. Make sure everything runs smooth. Kirk stepped forward. Sheeda, please, but she stopped him with a hand. You already begged once. This time, don't. Just let me go. Outside, the crowd parted as she walked through, cameras flashing, voices shouting her name. Someone yelled, Rasheeda, are y'all done for good? She didn't answer. She just got into her car and drove off into the glow of Atlanta's evening lights. Back inside, Kirk stood still, surrounded by the echoes of everything he had built and broken. Yandy spoke softly. You gonna chase her again? He shook his head slowly. Not this time. She deserves peace, even if it don't include me. But deep down, he knew peace wouldn't come that easy. Not when every decision, every regret, and every camera angle still had his fingerprints on it. And as the night fell, the Frost story didn't end it, only found a new silence that said more than any confession ever could. Night dropped over Atlanta, heavy and low, the kind of silence that hums before a storm. Kirk sat alone on the porch of their house, lights dim. The echo of Rasheeda's last words running through his head like a song he couldn't turn off. His phone screen glowed with unread messages, friends, producers, even fans asking what happened, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. Every text felt like an audience he didn't want anymore. Inside, the house still smelled like her perfume, the same scent she wore when they first met. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, whispering to himself, how many times can love die before it's really gone? Meanwhile, Rasheeda parked her car outside her mother's house. The street was quiet except for the sound of crickets in her own heartbeat. She sat there for a moment, watching the porch light flicker, before finally getting out. Shirlene opened the door before she could even knock. You don't have to explain, she said softly. I know. Rasheeda hugged her tight, burying her face in her shoulder like a child. I just need a place to breathe, she murmured. Then breathe, baby, Shirlene said. You done earned it. They sat in the kitchen, the clock ticking between them. You know what hurts the most, Rasheeda said, staring into her tea. It's not even the lies anymore. It's how easy he says, sorry, like the word don't mean nothing. Shirlene nodded. A man can say sorry 100 times, but if the lesson don't stick, the word's just noise. Rasheeda exhaled, the weight pressing down. I used to think we were unbreakable. Like if we made it through Jasmine, we could make it through anything. Baby, Shirlene said quietly, sometimes surviving the fire don't mean you're supposed to stay in it. Miles away, Kirk's live notification popped up again, but this time, he didn't speak right away. He sat there for a long minute, just breathing, eyes red, voice low when he finally began. I don't know what y'all expect me to say, he said. I messed up. I lost her trust. And maybe this time, I really lost her. The comments came fast. Fight for her. Let her go. Be real for once. He scrolled, eyes catching on one that said, you can't fix a woman who stopped waiting. He read it twice before ending the stream without another word. The next morning, social media exploded again. A gossip page had leaked unseen footage from behind the reunion set. It showed Kirk off camera, pacing, muttering to a producer, she won't come back if I don't do something big. Fans dissected every frame, saying he was planning another grand apology stunt. Others said it was desperation. Within hours, the hashtag Frost finale started trending. But what no one knew was that Kirk wasn't plotting a show. He was planning something quieter, one last chance to speak without cameras, without edits. By noon, he showed up outside pressed again, this time with no entourage, no phone in his hand. The team let him in reluctantly. She's not here, one said. I know, he replied. He walked through the aisles, touching the fabric she chose. The mannequin she had rearranged, the spot where she had streamed the live, it all felt like ghosts. In the back room, he found a note pinned to the corkboard. Keep receipts. Keep dignity. Keep peace. He smiled faintly. It was her handwriting. His phone buzzed. A text from Yandy. Producers want closure scene tonight. They'll film even if you don't show. Kirk typed back. They can film the empty chair. Then he turned off the phone. At Shirlene's house, Rasheeda was folding laundry when Carly rushed in with her phone. "Girl, you need to see this," she said, holding up the screen. It was Kirk standing outside the store on a fan's livestream. No script, no music, just him talking to the people gathered there. "I don't want sympathy," he said. "I just want accountability. I was scared of losing control, and in trying to keep it, I lost my wife. I disrespected the woman who built my world, and if she never comes home again, I'm still gonna say she made me better." He looked straight into the camera. "You hear me, Rasheeda? I messed up, but you deserve peace more than you ever owed me love." The video spread fast. Fans flooded her inbox again, some crying, some angry, all waiting for her response. She stared at the screen, tears finally falling. "He said the right words," she whispered, but too late. Shirlene touched her hand. "Late truth still counts for something," she said, "but only if you want it to." That evening, the network aired the reunion anyway. Clips flashed of old laughter, old fights, all spliced together like a love story told backward. In the final shot, Kirk's seat was empty. The host said, "The Frost legacy remains uncertain." Fans were shocked. Comments flooded in. "He finally respected her silence. She ended it her way. This is real love and real loss." After the broadcast, Rasheeda stood outside on the porch, phone in her hand, looking up at the sky. She typed a single post. "Sometimes peace costs everything, and it's worth it." Within minutes, millions saw it. The comments were filled with hearts, crowns, and prayers. But she didn't read them. She just put the phone down and watched the streetlights flicker on. Kirk drove past her mother's street that same night, slowing down but not stopping. He saw the light on in the window, her shadow moving inside. He smiled sadly, whispering, "As long as she's safe." Then he drove off into the dark. The next day, Atlanta moved on, but something about the Frost story lingered in the air like unfinished music. The fans kept guessing if they'd reconcile, if love would find a way. But the truth was simpler. For once, Rasheeda didn't need to. He moved closer, scanning the page. "This ain't what it looks like." "Then tell me what it is," she demanded. "Because it looks like you trying to build a life that doesn't include me again." Jasmine stepped back, not wanting to get caught between them. "I said my part," she murmured. "What y'all do with it ain't my business." She left quietly, and the door clicked shut behind her. Rasheeda's voice dropped. "Do you even hear yourself anymore? Every time you say it's not what it looks like, it turns out to be exactly that." Kirk shook his head. "You don't understand the game. Half of this industry is about how things look." "Then maybe I don't want to play," she shot back. "Maybe I just want a life that's real." Emotions ran high. Kirk tried to speak, but she cut him off. "You begged me to come back. You cried on live, and 2 days later I find out you were already drafting my replacement. What else am I supposed to believe?" His voice cracked. "It wasn't like that, Sheeda. I thought you thought I'd never find out," she said quietly. Her calm was scarier than any scream. "You've been chasing power so long, you don't even realize you lost love in the process." He stared at her, searching for something to hold on to, but the look in her eyes told him the answer before she said it. "I'm done fighting for a version of us that only exists when the cameras roll." He reached for her hand anyway. "Don't do this. Not like this." She pulled back. "There's no other way." The bell rang again. This time, it was Carly, Yandy, and Jock together, their faces tense from whatever news they carried. "The network just leaked the reunion teaser," Yandy said breathlessly. "They're airing it like the final Frost chapter." She held up her phone, showing the preview. Clips of the live, the audio leak, and even paparazzi footage of Rasheeda leaving the house flashed across the screen. The voiceover said, "After years of scandal, forgiveness, and second chances, Atlanta's royal couple may finally be finished for good." The room fell silent. Carly whispered, "They turned your heartbreak into an episode." Rasheeda closed her eyes, forcing steady breaths. "Of course they did," she said. "They always do." Kirk looked sick. "I didn't approve that," he said. "They can't air it without consent." Yandy shook her head. "You both signed release extensions last season, remember?" Carly put her phone down. "The fans are already picking sides again. This is about to blow bigger than last year's baby rumor." Outside, a crowd had already gathered. Bloggers, fans, live streamers all waiting for a reaction. Flashes from phones lit up the windows. Inside, the tension was thick enough to hum. Kirk turned to Rasheeda one last time. "You walk out right now, they'll write the ending for us." She looked at him, tears finally breaking through. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm tired of trying to rewrite something that was never ours to begin with." She walked to the back office, grabbed her jacket and a single duffel bag, and came back out without looking at anyone. I'm leaving the store to my team for now, she said to Carly. Make sure everything runs smooth. Kirk stepped forward. Rasheeda, please, but she stopped him with a hand. You already begged once. This time, don't. Just let me go. Outside, the crowd parted as she walked through, cameras flashing, voices shouting her name. Someone yelled, Rasheeda, are y'all done for good? She didn't answer. She just got into her car and drove off into the glow of Atlanta's evening lights. Back inside, Kirk stood still, surrounded by the echoes of everything he had built and broken. Yandy spoke softly. You gonna chase her again? He shook his head slowly. Not this time. She deserves peace, even if it don't include me. But deep down, he knew peace wouldn't come that easy. Not when every decision, every regret, and every camera angle still had his fingerprints on it. And as the night fell, the Frost story didn't end, it only found a new silence that said more than any confession ever could. Night dropped over Atlanta, heavy and low, the kind of silence that hums before a storm. Kirk sat alone on the porch of their house, lights dim. The echo of Rasheeda's last words running through his head like a song he couldn't turn off. His phone screen glowed with unread messages, friends, producers, even fans asking what happened, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. Every text felt like an audience he didn't want anymore. Inside, the house still smelled like her perfume, the same scent she wore when they first met. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, whispering to himself, how many times can love die before it's really gone? Meanwhile, Rasheeda parked her car outside her mother's house. The street was quiet except for the sound of crickets in her own heartbeat. She sat there for a moment, watching the porch light flicker, before finally getting out. Shirlene opened the door before she could even knock. You don't have to explain, she said softly. I know. Rasheeda hugged her tight, burying her face in her shoulder like a child. I just need a place to breathe, she murmured. Then breathe, baby, Shirlene said. You done earned it. They sat in the kitchen, the clock ticking between them. You know what hurts the most, Rasheeda said, staring into her tea. It's not even the lies anymore. It's how easy he says, sorry, like the word don't mean nothing. Shirlene nodded. A man can say sorry 100 times, but if the lesson don't stick, the word's just noise. Rasheeda exhaled, the weight pressing down. I used to think we were unbreakable. Like if we made it through Jasmine, we could make it through anything. Baby, Shirlene said quietly, sometimes surviving the fire don't mean you're supposed to stay in it. Miles away, Kirk's live notification popped up again, but this time, he didn't speak right away. He sat there for a long minute, just breathing, eyes red, voice low when he finally began. I don't know what y'all expect me to say, he said. I messed up. I lost her trust. And maybe this time, I really lost her. The comments came fast. Fight for her. Let her go. Be real for once. He scrolled, eyes catching on one that said, you can't fix a woman who stopped waiting. He read it twice before ending the stream without another word. The next morning, social media exploded again. A gossip page had leaked unseen footage from behind the reunion set. It showed Kirk off camera, pacing, muttering to a producer, she won't come back if I don't do something big. Fans dissected every frame, saying he was planning another grand apology stunt. Others said it was desperation. Within hours, the hashtag Frost finale started trending. But what no one knew was that Kirk wasn't plotting a show. He was planning something quieter, one last chance to speak without cameras, without edits. By noon, he showed up outside pressed again, this time with no entourage, no phone in his hand. The team let him in reluctantly. She's not here, one said. I know, he replied. He walked through the aisles, touching the fabric she chose. The mannequin she had rearranged, the spot where she had streamed the live, it all felt like ghosts. In the back room, he found a note pinned to the corkboard. Keep receipts. Keep dignity. Keep peace. He smiled faintly. It was her handwriting. His phone buzzed. A text from Yandy. Producers want closure scene tonight. They'll film even if you don't show. Kirk typed back. They can film the empty chair. Then he turned off the phone. At Shirlene's house, Rasheeda was folding laundry when Carly rushed in with her phone. Girl, you need to see this, she said, holding up the screen. It was Kirk standing outside the store on a fan's livestream. No script, no music, just him talking to the people gathered there. I don't want sympathy, he said. I just want accountability. I was scared of losing control, and in trying to keep it, I lost my wife. I disrespected the woman who built my world, and if she never comes home again, I'm still gonna say she made me better. He looked straight into the camera. You hear me, Rasheeda? I messed up, but you deserve peace more than you ever owed me love. The video spread fast. Fans flooded her inbox again, some crying, some angry, all waiting for her response. She stared at the screen, tears finally falling. He said the right words, she whispered, but too late. Shirlene touched her hand. Late truth still counts for something, she said, but only if you want it to. That evening, the network aired the reunion anyway. Clips flashed of old laughter, old fights, all spliced together like a love story told backward. In the final shot, Kirk's seat was empty. The host said, "The Frost legacy remains uncertain." Fans were shocked. Comments flooded in. He finally respected her silence. She ended it her way. This is real love and real loss. After the broadcast, Rasheeda stood outside on the porch, phone in her hand, looking up at the sky. She typed a single post. Sometimes peace costs everything, and it's worth it. Within minutes, millions saw it. The comments were filled with hearts, crowns, and prayers. But she didn't read them. She just put the phone down and watched the streetlights flicker on. Kirk drove past her mother's street that same night, slowing down but not stopping. He saw the light on in the window, her shadow moving inside. He smiled sadly, whispering, "As long as she's safe." Then he drove off into the dark. The next day, Atlanta moved on, but something about the Frost story lingered in the air like unfinished music. The fans kept guessing if they'd reconcile, if love would find a way. But the truth was simpler. For once, Rasheeda didn't need to prove anything. She didn't need a camera, a storyline, or applause. She had finally chosen herself. And somewhere in the quiet of that choice, Kirk began to understand what love really meant: not possession, not performance, but letting the person you broke finally heal without you. A week passed before anyone saw them again. Atlanta's gossip cycle moved fast, but the Frost story refused to fade. New blogs kept posting blurry photos, half-truths, fan theories. One showed Rasheeda at a brunch with Erica Mena and Carly Red, laughing softly, looking lighter than she had in months. Another claimed Kirk had been spotted alone at a recording studio, wearing the same ring he once swore he'd never take off. Fans flooded the comments with guesses. They're co-parenting, they're back together, they're done for good. But neither of them said a word. The silence between them had become louder than any headline. Inside that quiet, both were changing. Kirk stopped showing up on live, stopped letting producers spin his pain into content. He started visiting their sons more often, sitting in the car during practice instead of filming clips for followers. One afternoon, as his youngest ran across the field, he smiled without realizing it. A small, private smile that didn't need to prove anything. Maybe for the first time, he was just being a father instead of a character. Later, when a reporter called for a comment, he simply said, "No cameras this time." Rasheeda, meanwhile, threw herself into work, but not the way she used to. She hired new designers, expanded Pressed into a mentorship program for young Black women starting fashion lines, and began hosting quiet community events under the slogan "Build, Breathe, Begin." Every interview request got the same polite answer: "No comment, I'm focused on peace." It became her mantra, her boundary, her shield. People called it a comeback, but to her, it was a rebirth. Then one evening, out of nowhere, a clip leaked that reignited everything. A short, shaky video filmed at a charity event showed Kirk walking up to Rasheeda in the crowd. There was no argument, no shouting, just two people standing face to face. He said something too soft for the mic to catch, and she smiled faintly before walking away. The internet went wild. They're reconciling. He's begging again. This is love. This is strategy. Everyone had an opinion. No one had the truth. Behind the scenes, the truth was quieter. That night, after the event, Kirk texted her, "Thank you for not walking away when you saw me." She replied hours later, "You were respectful. That's enough for now." It wasn't closure. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something: a fragile truce built on the smallest gesture of decency. Days later, a producer from Love and Hip Hop reached out again. "The fans want a reunion special," she said eagerly. "You two don't even have to be together. Just talk about where you are now." Rasheeda thought about it for a long time. "If we do it," she said, "it's gonna be real this time. No edits, no scripts, just truth." Kirk agreed immediately. "Truth's all I got left." When the cameras rolled, the set was simpler, dim studio with 2 chairs, a table, and silence that stretched for full seconds before anyone spoke. The host asked the question everyone wanted answered: "Where do things stand between you now?" Rasheeda looked straight into the lens. "We're learning how to exist in peace, even if that means separately." Kirk nodded slowly. "I used to think keeping her meant I was winning. Now I know letting her breathe is how I show love." Emotions ran high again, but this time they didn't cry. They didn't shout. They just sat there, two people who had lived too many seasons to fake another one. The episode aired on a Sunday night, and fans were stunned. No drama, no fight, just maturity, a word nobody ever expected to use for the Frosts. One fan tweeted, "This felt like watching the end of a movie you didn't know was teaching you something." Another wrote, "That silence between them said more than any script could." The next morning, Kirk drove to Precede quietly before opening hours. He left a single brown envelope under the door, with her name on it. Inside were signed documents, proof that he had officially transferred half of his remaining ventures into her name. No strings attached. Number notes, no calls, no cameras. Just a man finally following through. When Rasheeda found the envelope later, she sat behind the counter for a long while, staring at it. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She just whispered, "Finally," and folded it into her planner without a word. Weeks turned into months. The gossip faded. The cameras moved on, and the Frosts became something rare in their world private. Sometimes fans spotted them at events, sitting at different tables but exchanging polite nods. Other times, Kirk was seen at Prest picking up their son or dropping off coffee for her staff. Nothing more. The drama had cooled, replaced by something softer, something human. One evening, long after closing, Rasheeda locked up the store and stood under the streetlights. The air smelled of rain and fresh asphalt. Across the street, Kirk was waiting by his car. She didn't walk away this time. She walked over, calm and steady. "You still believe in redemption?" she asked quietly. "Every day," he said, "but I don't expect it from you. I'm working on earning it from myself." She nodded once. "Good." They stood there for a while, saying nothing, letting the hum of the city fill the space between them. Finally, she said, "Maybe one day we'll talk again, not about the past, but about who we've become." He smiled, small but real. "I'll be ready when you are." As she drove off, the reflection of her taillights danced across the rain-soaked pavement. Kirk watched until the red glow disappeared into the night. It wasn't a reunion, not yet, but it was peace, the quiet kind that comes when two people finally stop performing love and start understanding it. And in that silence, Atlanta moved on. But the Frost story lived on, not as scandal, not as heartbreak, but as proof that even the loudest love stories can end softly, without applause, without revenge, just acceptance. Weeks later, spring settled over Atlanta, soft and humid. The kind of air that made everything feel like a memory before it even ended. Prest reopened after renovations, new mirrors, new lighting, new energy. Rasheeda stood by the front window, watching the first customers wander in. There were no cameras, no stage greetings, just real faces, real laughter. Every inch of the store felt different, freer somehow. She smiled when she caught herself humming. Peace had found its way into her routine, and it no longer felt temporary. Carly stopped by with her usual dramatic flair, tossing her bag onto the counter. "Girl, this glow is dangerous," she said. "People are saying you back like never before." Rasheeda laughed. "Back? I don't think I ever left. I just stopped showing up where I didn't belong." Carly grinned. "Amen to that." She lowered her voice. "So, you heard from Kirk?" Rasheeda hesitated. "A few times. About the kids mostly. Sometimes about business paperwork. But it's calm." Carly nodded. "That's new for y'all." Rasheeda's eyes softened. "Yeah, it's new. And I like new." Across town, Kirk was at the studio. No film crew, no producers. Just him and a small team of engineers working on something different. Not music, not a brand pitch, just a podcast. He called it Unlearned Lessons. His first episode was titled Accountability Isn't an Apology. He sat behind the mic, voice low and thoughtful. "I used to think fixing things meant saying sorry fast enough to stop the bleeding," he said. "But sometimes, healing means sitting with the pain you caused until you finally understand it." He didn't mention her name once, but everyone knew who he meant. Within hours, clips from the show spread across social media. Fans were shocked by the tono bravado, no self-defense, just honesty. Even people who once called him manipulative admitted he sounded like a man trying to rebuild himself from the inside out. That same week, a major fashion outlet reached out to Rasheeda for a cover story not about scandal, but about rebirth. She almost said no, but the title made her pause. "Power doesn't always roar." She agreed, on one condition: no mention of Kirk. The interview was raw, reflective. When the reporter asked what peace looked like to her now, she answered, "It looks like mornings without anxiety. It looks like knowing my worth even when nobody's watching. It looks like forgiveness that doesn't require reunion." When the article went live, the internet lit up again, but this time it wasn't chaos. Fans called her the blueprint, the comeback queen, proof you can survive anything. The love was overwhelming, And for once, it didn't come with pity, it came with respect. That night, Kirk read the article alone in his office. Every quote felt like a quiet echo of what he had failed to understand years ago. When he reached the line where she said, "I still believe in growth even if it's not together," he leaned back, smiling through the ache. He picked up his phone but didn't text her. Instead, he wrote a note to himself. If you ever get another chance, show up healed, not hopeful. Time passed quietly after that. Their sons graduated, celebrated milestones, and both parents showed up together, but separate. Photos surfaced of them smiling in the same frame, standing inches apart but peaceful. Fans flooded the comments with nostalgia. "They look happy," one wrote. "Not as a couple, just as people." And that was the truth. They had become something rarer than reconciliation, they had become whole on their own. One evening, at a charity gala downtown, fate placed them at the same table again. The air was filled with low music and champagne chatter. Kirk approached her gently. "You look good," he said. She smiled, not shy, not guarded. "Thank you. So do you." They talked quietly for a few minutes about their kids, about business, about life. Then, as the crowd began to fade into the rhythm of the night, he said softly, "You ever think about what it all meant?" She looked at him for a long time. "It meant we learned," she said. "And learning was the only way to let go." He nodded. "You think we'll ever?" she interrupted, not unkindly. "Some stories aren't meant to circle back. They're meant to end with grace." He smiled, eyes heavy with acceptance. "Then I'm glad ours ended like this." When the gala wrapped, they walked out side by side, saying goodnight under the streetlights like two people who had outgrown bitterness. No cameras followed this time. No headlines tried to rewrite it. Atlanta moved on. The fans moved on. And the Frosts, after years of chaos, betrayal, and rebuilding, finally did too. The next morning, Rasheeda posted one last message to her followers. "Peace isn't about who stays. It's about who you become when everything falls away." Millions liked it, but she didn't post for the numbers. She posted it for herself, a quiet marker of survival. Kirk saw it too and reposted it without a caption. That silence said everything. And for the first time in years, both of them woke up to something they hadn't felt since before the camera's real freedom. Summer crept into the city slow, with that golden haze Atlanta gets when the heat lingers past midnight. Rasheeda had started spending her evenings on the back patio, barefoot, her laptop open, 2 sketches for the new pressed collection. The house was quiet except for cicadas and the hum of the street beyond the fence. She didn't miss the noise anymore, the interviews, the speculation, the constant pressure to prove something. Now, every small thing felt sacred. Peace had become a habit. Earlier that day, she'd driven out to a workshop space where she was mentoring a group of young designers. One of them, barely 20, asked shyly, "How did you keep going when everything went public like that?" Rasheeda smiled, remembering all the nights she had sat in the dark scrolling through headlines about her own heartbreak. "By reminding myself that public doesn't mean permanent," she said. "What people say changes every week. What you build for yourself lasts." The girl nodded like she'd just been handed a secret. And maybe she had. Meanwhile, Kirk was adjusting to a new rhythm of life too. He had turned the podcast into a full project, hosting other men to talk about accountability, marriage, fatherhood. It wasn't slick or dramatic, it was raw, awkward, sometimes uncomfortable. Fans were shocked that he didn't edit out his stumbles. In one episode, he said quietly, "It's easy to perform being a good man. It's harder to practice it when nobody's clapping." That clip went viral, but not because it was flashy. People recognized sincerity when they heard it. The first time Rasheeda heard that episode, she was driving. She pulled over, turned off the engine, and listened through the whole thing. When it ended, she sat there for a long time. The man in that recording wasn't the Kirk she'd known for years, the one who deflected, who spun things for the cameras. He sounded older, stripped down, real. She didn't cry. She just nodded to herself and whispered, "Good. He finally gets it." That same week, she got a call from the network. "We're doing a special on legacy couples where they are now," the producer said. "We'd love to include you and Kirk, even separately." Rasheeda thought about it, her hand resting on the edge of her desk. "If it's about growth, not gossip," she said, "then maybe." The producer hesitated. "No sensationalism. Promise," she agreed. A month later, filming began. The crew followed her through her store, her home, her new foundation events. They asked what had changed most about her life. "Me," she said simply. "I changed." Everything else followed. They filmed Kirk too, in his studio, working with new artists, laughing quietly with his sons. His segment ended with him saying, "Sometimes you lose something just to realize you never knew how to hold it right." When the special aired, the public was stunned again, but not in the old way. There were no scandals, no anger, just two people who had lived through the fire and come out softer. Social media lit up with messages from fans. This is real maturity. They grew up. This is love evolving, not ending. And for the first time, the Frosts weren't trending for chaos, they were trending for peace. After the broadcast, Kirk texted her, "You did good." She replied after a pause, "So, did you?" Then another message followed from him. "For what it's worth, I never stopped rooting for you." She stared at it for a while, then typed back, "That's all I ever wanted. Thank you." Weeks passed. One evening, at an industry awards show, Rasheeda was honored for her contributions to fashion and entrepreneurship. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. From the back of the room, Kirk watched quietly, smiling. He didn't go up to her after, didn't interrupt her moment. He just clapped until his hands stung and left before she saw him. That night, she found a single white rose left backstage with a note that said, "Proud of you, always, Kay." She didn't text him back, but she kept the note tucked in her journal. Time rolled forward again, as it always does. Prest expanded into new cities. Kirk's podcast grew into a non-profit mentoring young men about family and respect. Their sons thrived, one in business school, the other chasing music dreams. And through it all, the two of them kept that rare, delicate friendship that comes from forgiveness without expectation. One Sunday morning, years later, Rasheeda sat on her porch sipping coffee, scrolling through her feed. An old clip from Love and Hip Hop popped up, one of their fights from years ago. She watched herself shouting, eyes bright with anger, hurt, raw and unguarded. She didn't look away. When the clip ended, she smiled softly and whispered, "We were just kids learning how to love in public." Then she deleted it from her saved posts. That night, Kirk called. Not for drama, not for business, just to talk. "I saw that interview you did," he said. "You sounded peaceful." "I am," she said. Finally, there was a pause. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. She laughed lightly. "From scandal to sanity." "Yeah, it's wild." "I'm happy for you," he said. "And I mean that for real." She smiled into the quiet. "Thank you, Kirk. That means a lot." The call ended without goodbyes, just a sense that both of them knew what needed to be said had been said. As midnight fell, the city buzzed faintly beyond her windows, but Rasheeda felt none of the old weight. She closed her laptop, turned off her phone, and whispered a small prayer of gratitude for growth, for grace, for endings that didn't need to be bitter. And somewhere across town, Kirk sat in his car outside the studio, staring up at the same stars. He thought about all the years they'd shared, the fights, the laughter, the chaos, the love, and smiled. He didn't want to go back anymore. He just wanted to be worthy of the peace they'd both earned. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real. And sometimes, that's better. Autumn came quietly, soft and golden. The kind of season that reminded Rasheeda how much life had changed without her even noticing. Atlanta felt slower now, calmer, as if the city itself had finally exhaled. Her mornings had a rhythm again. Open the blinds, make tea, water the plants, check emails from her design team. She had stopped chasing noise. Even when gossip blogs tried to revive old headlines, she no longer reacted. It was strange at first, the absence of chaos. But peace, she realized, doesn't feel exciting. It feels steady. It feels earned. One evening she stood outside Prest, watching customers leave with shopping bags and laughter spilling into the street. She thought about how far she had come since that night she packed her suitcases, thinking her world was ending. Now, the same woman who once cried in silence was running a growing empire and mentoring women half her age. She didn't see herself as a survivor anymore. She saw herself as someone who finally learned to build instead of repair. When people stopped her on the street to say they admired her strength, she would smile politely and say, "Thank you, but strength comes from lessons, not pain." Meanwhile, Kirk had found a purpose that didn't depend on headlines. His podcast had turned into a full mentorship program called Stand Up, aimed at teaching young men how to take accountability without ego. Every Saturday he met with a small group at a youth center on the South Side, talking about loyalty, money, and respect. He didn't preach, he just spoke from experience, the kind of raw honesty that made people listen. When asked about his past, he never deflected. "I lost good things," he would say, "but I learned better things." People who once called him arrogant began calling him humble. His reputation didn't matter anymore. His impact did. Their paths crossed again at a community gala hosted by Yandi and Mendices, an event raising money for single mothers starting small businesses. It was elegant, low-lit, filled with familiar faces from years of television drama. All of them a little older, a little wiser. When Kirk walked in, Rasheeda noticed but didn't flinch. He approached her table after a while, greeting her with a gentle smile. "Still shining," he said. "Always," she replied, returning the smile without hesitation. They talked briefly about the foundation, about their sons, about how strange it felt to live without the cameras dictating every move. There was no tension in the air, no leftover bitterness, only mutual recognition. They had both outgrown the version of themselves that needed to win the argument. Later that night, when the crowd thinned, Kirk found himself standing outside near the parking lot, the city humming softly in the distance. Rasheeda stepped out moments later, adjusting her jacket. "You leaving already?" he asked. She nodded. "Big day tomorrow." He hesitated, then said, "You know, I used to think the hardest part of all this was losing you, but the hardest part was realizing I didn't know who I was without trying to prove I could keep you." She looked at him for a long time. "That's growth, Kirk. I'm proud of you." He smiled faintly. "You always did see the best in me, even when I didn't deserve it." She shook her head gently. "No, I just saw what you could be. The rest was up to you." They said goodnight and went their separate ways once more. Not as exes tangled in history, but as two people who had finally reached the same page, even if they weren't in the same story anymore. Months passed. The Frost name, once tied to scandal, became something else entirely. Articles began describing them as a symbol of evolution. Two people who had managed to turn public heartbreak into quiet maturity. Fans stopped waiting for reconciliation and started admiring the way they coexisted in peace. Kirk's nonprofit expanded. Rasheeda's brand flourished. Sometimes they'd appear in the same photo at events, smiling in a way that didn't need explanation. The internet would speculate, as always, but the truth was simple: they had both moved forward without erasing each other. One night, long after closing, Rasheeda sat alone at Prest with the lights dimmed and her laptop open. She was finalizing sketches for her next launch when she came across an old folder labeled Frost Family Vision. She clicked it out of curiosity and found photos of their first store, their old home, their wedding day. For a moment, she just stared, remembering how hard they had fought to build something real out of chaos. She didn't feel pain anymore, just gratitude. Gratitude for what it had been, and peace for what it had become. She closed the folder, whispered, "Thank you for the lessons," and shut down the laptop. Across the city, Kirk was recording another podcast episode, his voice calm and reflective. "Sometimes," he said, "you think the goal is to hold on, but the real strength is learning how to let go with love." He paused for a moment before adding softly, "And when you do it right, letting go doesn't mean losing it, means finally understanding." He ended the recording, sat back, and smiled to himself. The city outside was quiet, the same quiet that once scared him but now felt like home. As the year came to a close, both of them stood in separate corners of Atlanta, looking out at the skyline that had witnessed every chapter of their story. No cameras, no audience, just life moving forward. Rasheeda whispered a prayer of thanks. Kirk sent his sons a message that simply said, "Be better than I was." And somewhere between those two gestures, the Frost story found its final piece, not in reunion, but in redemption. The city of Atlanta moved like a slow heartbeat that autumn, glowing under streetlights that hummed against the chill. The air carried a stillness that used to feel foreign to Rasheeda Frost. Once, her name filled headlines, hashtags, trending lists. Now, it lived somewhere else, on storefronts, in small business seminars, in the mouths of young women, saying, "She made me believe I could." Her story no longer needed to be shouted. It was felt. Prest had grown again, not louder but deeper. The new flagship in Midtown stood tall, its windows lined with soft white lights that made every product look like part of a story. Inside, Rasheeda walked the floor in a white blazer, hair tied back, gold hoops glinting in the light. Her staff followed her lead easily, not out of fear but respect. She had built this not from scandal but from stamina, the kind that doesn't fade once cameras stop rolling. Outside, rain began to fall. The sound against the glass was steady, like applause from the sky. Rasheeda looked up, smiled faintly, and whispered, "We made it." Not to anyone else, just to herself. Later that night, after locking up, she drove down to her old neighborhood, where her mother still lived. Charlene had turned the front porch into a garden of mismatched flower pots and fairy lights. She was waiting with a blanket and 2 cups of tea. "You're late," she said, smiling. "You're old," Rasheeda shot back, laughing as she sat beside her. For a moment, they didn't speak. The world around them was quiet, no paparazzi, no producers, no audience. Just to women who had lived through enough storms to finally enjoy the calm. Charlene glanced over. You ever think about him? Rasheeda didn't have to ask who. She just nodded slowly. Sometimes, she said, not like before. I think about who we were, not what we lost. Her mother nodded. You found peace. That's more than most get. Somewhere across the city, Kirk Frost sat in a dimly lit recording studio. Not the one he used to brag about on camera. This one was small, quiet, lined with instruments and notebooks. He pressed record on his podcast mic and leaned forward. Today's episode, he said softly, is about gratitude. He paused, breathing deep. You don't realize how much noise you make until silence finally finds you. For years, I was scared of silence. Now, it's the only thing that tells me the truth. His voice carried the weight of reflection. People ask if I'd change anything. The truth, no. I'd just listen sooner. He looked at a photo pinned on the wall. Him, Rasheeda, their sons, taken years ago. Back when forgiveness was just a word they threw around in interviews. I wasn't a bad man, he said, almost to himself. Just an unhealed one. And I hurt someone who deserved my healing, not my excuses. He ended the recording, sat back, and stared at the red on-air light until it clicked off. Outside, thunder rolled softly. He smiled. Guess we both made peace with the storm. Months passed. The Frost family name, once tangled in headlines, had become something quieter, a lesson. Magazines wrote about their evolution, not as gossip but as growth. One cover story called it the redefinition of legacy. Another described them as two souls who learned that peace is a love story too. Their sons thrived, Kai and Carter. Now young men, carving their own paths. Kai managed part of Rasheeda's expanding empire, handling digital branding with an ease she envied. Carter, the dreamer, had followed Kirk into music, though on his own terms. His songs carried his father's rhythm but his mother's truth. When he performed at a small festival one summer night, both of them were in the audience, standing on opposite sides of the crowd. When the set ended, their eyes met across the sea of people. They both clapped, proud, not of themselves but of what they'd built, a child who grew up whole despite everything. After the show, Kirk walked over slowly. You see him up there, he said, voice thick. He's better than both of us. Rasheeda smiled softly. That's the point. They didn't stay long, just long enough to say goodbye without the heaviness that used to linger. Years continued to move, the way years do quietly, until one day the past feels like someone else's story. By then, Rasheeda had opened 3 more stores and launched a mentoring academy for women entrepreneurs. She traveled, spoke on panels, and told her story not as a survivor of betrayal but as a student of growth. You can rebuild a brand, she would tell the crowd, but rebuilding yourself is where the real work is. People listened because she didn't sound rehearsed. She sounded healed. Kirk, meanwhile, had shifted his energy entirely to his foundation. Every week he met men from all walks of life. Fathers trying to reconnect with their kids. Husbands trying to understand their wives. Young boys trying not to become headlines. He didn't sugarcoat anything. I was you once, he'd say, thinking power meant control. But real power is accountability. They listened, not because he was famous, but because he was real. Sometimes, he'd drive past Prest on his way home. He never stopped. He didn't need to. It was enough to know she was there, doing exactly what she was meant to do. He'd smile, grip the steering wheel, and whisper, she always was the strong one. The years between them became something sacred, a bridge that didn't have to be crossed to prove connection. Birthdays, holidays, family events, they showed up, laughed, talked, left. No tension, no longing. Just to people who had outgrown the war and learned how to be gentle again. At Carter's college graduation, Kirk stood to one side, recording the moment, while Rasheeda sat near the front, clapping proudly. Afterward, when the crowd spilled into the parking lot, Carter found them both. Can we get one picture? He asked. They stood side by side, smiling under the summer sun as cameras clicked. That single photo traveled the internet faster than any scandal ever had. But this time, it wasn't tagged with rumors or accusations. The caption read simply, healing looks good on them. A few months later, Rasheeda received a letter, handwritten, postmarked from an address she recognized immediately. Kirk's handwriting was still the same, sharp and deliberate. Sheeda, I won't take up much space. I just wanted to say thank you for teaching me what love really meant, even when I didn't know how to give it back right. I used to think legacy was about money and brand names. Now I know it's about character. Our sons carry your strength and my lessons. And I think that's balance. If I never say another word publicly, know this. You were the best part of every version of me. Kirk, she read it twice. then folded it carefully and tucked it into a box with old photos and keepsakes. The only box she still kept from their marriage. She didn't cry. She just smiled quietly and whispered, "Thank you." Time kept moving, but something about both of them stayed timeless. Atlanta changed, new buildings, new stars, new headlines, but every so often, a fan would spot Rasheeda in a cafe or Kirk at an event and still call them the Frosts. They didn't correct it. They'd just laugh. History, after all, doesn't need editing when peace is the ending. One evening, years later, Rasheeda stood on a balcony overlooking the city skyline. The sun dipped low, casting the world in gold. Below, her son's laughter echoed faintly from the street. She closed her eyes and breathed it in, the smell of rain, the hum of cars, the life she had built. She thought about everything she had survived, the betrayals, the headlines, the heartbreak, and how all of it had led here, to this quiet evening of gratitude. "You were right, Mama," she whispered. "Peace does cost everything, but it's worth every bit." On the other side of town, Kirk sat in his backyard, surrounded by lights strung through old oak trees. He was recording one final podcast episode. "This is the last one," he said softly into the mic. "Not because I'm done talking, but because I finally learned to listen." He looked up at the sky. "We spend so much time trying to prove we've changed. Sometimes, the real change is not needing to prove it anymore." He paused, smiled, and ended with, "Thank you for listening." He turned off the mic, leaned back, and let the night fill the silence. In the years that followed, their names became part of Atlanta's cultural story. Not for drama, but for transformation. Love and hip-hop producers would occasionally mention them in interviews. They were the ones who showed growth is still good television. Younger cast members cited them as examples. "You can go through it and still come out whole," one said. "Look at the Frosts." Rasheeda never returned to the show, but she didn't have to. Her life had become its own quiet legacy, proof that peace could be the loudest ending of all. Kirk, now mentoring full-time, often told younger artists, "Don't wait until you lose something real to start valuing peace." His students listened because they saw what regret turned into when handled with grace. On their 20th business anniversary, a journalist asked Rasheeda what she wanted her story to stand for. She thought for a moment and said, "Forgiveness without foolishness, healing without hate, and love, even the kind that ends as something that can still make you better." The quote went viral. Kirk reposted it with a simple caption, "Truth." Years later, when they were both older, Atlanta honored them at a cultural legacy gala. The night was elegant, soft jazz, candlelight, applause. When Rasheeda's name was announced, she walked across the stage in a flowing black gown, her poise unshaken, her smile serene. Kirk, sitting in the front row, clapped first and loudest. When she took the mic, she said, "We built our story in front of the world. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that's what lasts." Afterward, they found each other backstage. Kirk laughed lightly. "You still kill a stage like no one else." She smiled. Some things don't change. They stood there, quiet for a while, the years between them folding into something gentle. Finally, he said, "We did good, huh?" She nodded. "Yeah, we did." As they walked out together into the night, the cameras flashed, not with intrusion but celebration. And for once, neither of them felt exposed. They felt seen. The next morning, the papers wrote about them not as a couple or controversy, but as Atlanta icons. One headline read, "From Pain to Peace, the Frosts redefine legacy." It was a fitting summary for two people who had turned every wound into wisdom. In her home office that afternoon, Rasheeda poured herself a cup of coffee and looked at the framed photo from Carter's graduation. Her sons were grown, the brand was thriving, her heart was light. She took a deep breath and whispered, "This is it, the life I prayed for." Across the city, Kirk sat in his studio, surrounded by photos, awards, and a single sticky note on the wall that read, "Peace is the final proof." He smiled at it, knowing it wasn't something he wrote, it was something he finally understood. The winter light over Atlanta came thin and gold, sliding through bare trees and the glass walls of the pressed headquarters. Rasheeda arrived early every morning now, not because she had to but because she liked the silence before the day began. The store no longer felt like a battlefield between love and business. It felt like a cathedral for work, a space built from everything she'd learned about grace and endurance. She moved through it slowly, fingertips brushing the racks, her heels soft against the floor. Outside, the city was waking. Delivery trucks, trains, a few joggers in hoodies, but inside, it was just her heartbeat and the hum of lights. Sometimes she'd stop by the display window and catch her own reflection. There was still beauty there, but not the kind that shouted. The lines near her eyes told stories she didn't need to hide anymore. She'd smile faintly at that reflection and whisper, "You did all right." When her staff arrived, laughter filled the space. They were younger, lively, always calling her boss lady, even when she told them not to. She liked watching them, these women who reminded her of herself at 20, hungry, fearless, unaware of how strong they'd have to become. Mentoring them had become her favorite part of the business. She taught them about branding and budgets, but also about balance. You can chase a dream, she'd tell them, but don't let it chase away your peace. They listened, not because she was famous, but because her calm carried weight. Around noon, she'd retreat to her small office at the back. On the wall hung a framed photo from Carter's graduation, the one where she and Kirk stood side by side, smiling like two people who had finally stopped running. She'd look at it sometimes, not out of longing, but as a reminder that some stories can end with softness. Carter called often now. He was 25, touring with his band, his music laced with soul and southern truth. Kai handled the family's business ventures, calling every week to update her on expansion plans. They both carried bits of their parents, the drive, the resilience, the stubborn hope that everything broken could still be rebuilt. Watching them succeed had become Rasheeda's quiet reward. When people congratulated her for being the strong one, she always said the same thing. Strength don't mean never falling. It means standing up one more time than you fell. Most evenings, she'd visit her mother. Charlene had gotten older but not quieter. Her voice still filled a room. The two of them would sit on the porch wrapped in blankets, sipping sweet tea and gossiping about everyone but themselves. Sometimes, Kirk's name came up. Not in anger, just in passing. "You heard his podcast?" Charlene would ask. "He getting folks together, talking about forgiveness." Rasheeda would smile. "Yeah, he found his lane." There was no bitterness left, only acceptance, like time had finally filed down every sharp edge. Across the city, Kirk's days had their own rhythm. He still ran his foundation, mentoring young men who reminded him too much of who he used to be. The walls of his office were covered in photos, families reunited, fathers hugging sons, boys who'd stayed out of trouble because someone believed in them. Every success story softened something inside him. He had become the man he wished he'd been when he was younger. On weekends, he hosted community workshops called Unlearn and Rebuild. They weren't about preaching, they were about honesty. He'd stand at the front of a small hall, hands in his pockets, voice steady. "You don't fix pain by hiding it," he'd say. "You fix it by owning it." People listened because he didn't sound like a motivational speaker. He sounded like a man who had paid the price for his wisdom. At night, when the crowd left and the lights dimmed, he'd sit alone in the empty hall, the echoes still hanging in the air. Sometimes he thought about calling Rasheeda, not to reopen anything, just to say hello. But he never pressed send. He knew that peace meant leaving the good things untouched. Once in a while, their paths crossed award shows, charity events, a mutual friend's birthday. Every meeting carried that quiet warmth of familiarity without expectation. One evening, at a black tie gala downtown, they ended up seated at the same table. The orchestra played slow jazz, champagne glasses clinked, and the years between them felt like a distant hum. Kirk leaned over slightly. "Funny how life works," he said. Rasheeda smiled, eyes glinting under the light. "It always circles back to peace." They talked easily, about family, about Atlanta, about how fame had changed. No one watching would have guessed the history between them, the scandals, the heartbreak, the rebuilds. They looked like old friends sharing a private joke in a crowded room. When the night ended, Kirk offered his arm as they walked out. She took it, just for balance, and for a moment it felt like the city itself was exhaling with them. As the years stretched forward, their story slipped quietly into legend. Younger reality stars mentioned them in interviews as proof that you could survive the spotlight without losing yourself. Students studied Rasheeda's business model in entrepreneurship programs. Kirk's foundation partnered with the city to create mentorship scholarships. They had become something rare, public figures who had learned to live privately. On her 50th birthday, Rasheeda threw a small dinner, just family and close friends. Candles flickered across the table, and laughter filled the room. When it was time for speeches, her sons stood together. Carter spoke first. "Mama," he said, "you taught us that love don't end when people change. It just changes shape." Kai nodded beside him. "You and Dad showed us that even when things fall apart, family don't have to." The guests clapped softly, some wiping tears. Rasheeda looked around the table, her children, her mother, her friends, and felt something she hadn't known in her 20s. Contentment that didn't depend on anyone else. After dinner, as the crowd lingered over dessert, Kirk walked in quietly. He hadn't been sure if he should come, but Kai had insisted. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, then Rasheeda smiled. You always did like showing up late, she teased. He grinned. Some things never change. He handed her a small box. Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with 2 words, "Thank you." She touched it gently, eyes shining. "For what?" "For teaching me how to be human again," he said. The rest of the evening was easy. They laughed about old times, about TV moments that felt like another lifetime. When he left, he hugged her softly, whispering, "You built everything we dreamed of." She replied, "And you learned everything we were supposed to." Later that night, after the guests were gone, Rasheeda stood on her balcony, the bracelet glinting in the moonlight. The city below pulsed with the quiet rhythm of life moving forward. She thought about legacy, not the brand, not the fame, but the energy you leave behind in people. Her sons, her staff, her community, that was her legacy now. And somewhere across town, Kirk was sitting on his porch doing the same, staring at the same moon, thinking the same thoughts. Years would keep passing. The headlines would fade, but their names would stay like soft echoes woven into the city's memory, symbols of endurance, of lessons learned, of love redefined. And whenever Atlanta nights grew long and quiet, the wind carried a kind of peace that felt almost like their story still whispering through the streets. Love doesn't always end, it just learns how to rest. Spring returned to Atlanta, soft and heavy with rain. Streets shimmered in the lamplight, the smell of wet pavement filling the air. Rasheeda had always loved nights like this, the kind that quieted everything. She sat by the window of her home office, the bracelet Kirk gave her resting against the desk as she wrote notes for her next mentorship seminar. Her handwriting was steady, almost elegant, each word written with care. Discipline, peace, forgiveness, purpose. She smiled faintly at the page. Years ago, those words would have sounded like cliches. Now, they were truths she had earned the hard way. Down the hall, her phone buzzed with a call from Carter. She picked it up, warmth in her tone. "Hey baby." "Ma," he said, breathless, the hum of a studio behind him. "Guess who just came through the booth?" "Who?" "Dad. He dropped a verse for my track." Rasheeda blinked, surprised but not shocked. "You working together now?" Carter laughed. "It just happened. We were talking about the song, and he started writing. He's still got it, though. I think people need to hear it." She smiled, her voice soft. "Good. That's what healing sounds like." After the call ended, she leaned back and stared out at the rain. There was a time when hearing his name would have made her chest tighten, but not anymore. Now it just felt like another chapter turning smoothly. She thought about how strange it was that peace could feel both full and empty at the same time. Like a song fading out, while the melody stayed in your head. A few weeks later, she attended Carter's album release event. It was held downtown in a small, intimate venue with dim lights and exposed brick walls. When she arrived, she saw Kirk already there, standing near the back, head bowed slightly as he listened to their son perform. Carter's voice carried emotion that seemed to fill every inch of the room. The lyrics were about love, mistakes, and forgiveness, a mirror of everything his parents had lived through. When the final verse came, Kirk closed his eyes. The line landed softly. "Some stories break you just enough to build you better." After the show, the 3 of them stood together near the stage. Carter's eyes sparkled with pride. "We did that," he said. Kirk smiled. "You did that? We just inspired the mess." Rasheeda laughed, shaking her head. "And look, no drama for once." The 3 of them laughed together, their voices blending easily like they had in the best of years. No tension, no old ghosts, just family. As the night wound down, a few photographers asked for a picture. Rasheeda hesitated for half a second before agreeing. Kirk stepped beside her, Carter between them, flashbulbs bursting around them. When the photos hit social media later, fans were stunned. The caption on Carter's post read simply, "Family, healed and human." It went viral for all the right reasons. That summer, Kirk's foundation hosted its biggest event yet, a youth summit on accountability and manhood. Over 300 young men filled the hall. Community leaders, teachers, and even former reality stars came to support. The keynote speaker was Kirk himself, and for the first time in years, he felt nervous. He looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath, and began. "There was a time when I thought success meant never being wrong. I thought control meant strength. I was wrong about both." He paused, letting the silence settle. "It took losing things that mattered to me to learn that real power is peace." The crowd applauded softly, not out of hype but respect. As he finished, someone in the back shouted, "You and Rasheeda showed us growth is real." Kirk smiled and nodded. "Yeah, we did. And growth don't stop when the cameras turn off." Later that night, alone in his office, he sat by the window and watched the moon rise over the city. He reached for his phone, scrolling through old pictures, photos from the store opening. The reunion special, family trips. He stopped on one of her smiling beside him at a red carpet event from years ago. He studied it quietly before whispering, "You always were the light." He didn't call her. He didn't need to. Sometimes, silence said everything. Months later, Rasheeda stood on stage at a university in front of hundreds of students. She had been invited to deliver a keynote on business and emotional resilience. "When I was your age," she said, pacing the stage slowly, "I thought success meant proving people wrong. But now I know success is proving yourself right. I used to fight battles that didn't need winners. Now I only build things that need purpose." Her words landed heavy, sincere. As the applause roared, she smiled faintly, her eyes glistening not from sadness, but from recognition. She had finally become the woman she'd always tried to be. After the event, she met a young woman backstage who was trembling. "Miss Frost," she said softly, "I watched you go through everything on TV. And seeing you standing still shining it changed how I see my own worth." Rasheeda hugged her gently. "Baby, strength don't mean you never hurt. It means you heal without turning bitter." That night, when she got home, she found a package waiting at her doorstep. It was from Kirk, a hardbound book titled The Unlearned Lessons, Reflections from the Other Side of Ego. Inside the cover, a note read, "Thank you for teaching me the lessons I couldn't learn alone. Peace always, Kay." She smiled, running her fingers over the words before setting the book on her nightstand. As years drifted by, their story settled into history, a quiet landmark in Atlanta's cultural memory. Documentaries and retrospectives revisited the early days of love and hip-hop, and when their names came up, the tone had changed. Commentators no longer said scandal, they said growth. Old clips played fights, tears, reconciliations, but were followed by footage of what came after: Rasheeda's stores, Kirk's foundation, their children's success. It felt like closure on screen. One evening, as part of a special tribute, producers invited both of them to film a reflective segment. They sat across from each other in a dim studio, soft light washing over their faces. The interviewer asked, "If you could tell your younger selves one thing, what would it be?" Rasheeda smiled gently. "I'd tell her to love without losing herself." Kirk nodded. "I'd tell him that control isn't protection, it's fear in disguise." The interviewer leaned forward. "And if you could tell each other something now?" Rasheeda looked at him for a long moment. "Thank you," she said simply. He smiled. "Thank you back." The cameras kept rolling as they sat there in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. It wasn't the silence of regret anymore. It was the silence of peace. In the years that followed, their legacy grew far beyond television. The Frost Foundation funded programs across the South. Prest became a multi-city brand known for community outreach and mentorship. Schools invited them both to speak, sometimes together, sometimes apart. And every time, they spoke from the same place: honesty, humility, and the kind of wisdom that only time can carve out of chaos. When Atlanta named a block after them, honoring their contributions to culture and business, they stood side by side as the mayor unveiled the sign, Frost Avenue. The crowd cheered, flashing cameras glinting in the afternoon light. Kirk leaned over and whispered, "Never thought we'd share a street instead of a storyline." Rasheeda laughed softly. "I'll take it." Later, at the private reception, their sons toasted them both. "You taught us what love really means," Carter said. "Not the easy kind, the real kind, the kind that forgives, grows, and lets go." Kirk lifted his glass, voice low. "To peace, the hardest thing we ever earned." Rasheeda added, "And the one thing we'll never lose again." The glasses clinked, applause filled the room. It wasn't a celebration of reunion, it was a celebration of release. They had finally made peace their legacy. That night, Rasheeda sat on her balcony overlooking the glowing city. She wore the silver bracelet still, now worn smooth with time. Below, the streets buzzed with life, people rushing, horns echoing, laughter spilling from open doors. She thought of the young girl she once was. The woman who tried to hold everything together. The wife who learned that sometimes letting go is the truest form of love. The sky shifted to indigo, the first stars appearing. She whispered a prayer, not for more success, not even for more love, but simply for gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for all of it." Across town, Kirk was in his studio again, finishing one last recording, a message he planned to release as his farewell. "This one's for anyone who ever thought they had to fight to be seen," he said into the mic. "Sometimes, the fight ends when you stop performing and start living. Peace ain't loud, but it's the most powerful sound you'll ever hear." He paused, then added, "This is Kirk Frost, signing off." He turned off the mic, leaned back, and closed his eyes. Outside, the night breeze rustled through the open window, carrying the city's hum like a lullaby. And in that shared stillness, her on her balcony, him in his studio, their story rested. Not unfinished, not erased, but finally whole. Summer in Atlanta burned slow, the heat curling off the pavement like smoke. The city never really slept, it just shifted moods. Afternoons belonged to ambition, nights to memory. Prest stayed open late these days, tourists, students, stylists, all drifting through the glowing doorway that still carried her name in silver script. Rasheeda moved through the aisles quietly, greeting customers, fixing a sleeve here, a mannequin there. Every corner felt alive again. Music pulsed low from hidden speakers, old soul records, the kind Kirk used to play in their kitchen on Sunday mornings. She didn't change the playlist. Some sounds didn't need replacing. Outside, cameras flashed for a few seconds, bloggers catching photos for an article about Atlanta's most influential women. The attention used to make her anxious. Now, she just smiled for 2 frames and went back inside. Her power no longer came from being seen. It came from being steady. That weekend, her team organized a fashion showcase at the Civic Hall. Dozens of young designers she had mentored over the years presented collections under the banner. Prest Presents, Voices of the South. Backstage buzzed with nerves and laughter, fabrics draped across racks like rainbows. Rasheeda walked through the chaos.com and centered, whispering encouragement, adjusting earrings, pinning hymns. The show opened to a packed house. When she stepped on stage to introduce her mentees, applause shook the ceiling. Cameras caught her smile, the soft, knowing kind that said she had survived everything and still believed in beginnings. After the show, as the crowd thinned, she slipped into the quiet green room. Kirk was there, leaning against a table, clapping slowly. "You really did that," he said. She turned, surprised but not startled. "You came. Couldn't miss history," he replied. She laughed softly. "You still dramatic." He shrugged. "Old habits." They talked for a while, easy, like 2 old bandmates remembering a song they once made together. When the last staffer left, he helped her fold banners and carry boxes to her car. Rain started to fall again, light and rhythmic. She looked up and said, "It always rains after something good." Kirk smiled. "That's Atlanta's way of clapping twice." They stood by her car for a long moment, rain tapping against metal. "You proud of yourself?" he asked. "I am," she said. "And I'm proud of you too." He looked at her like he was trying to memorize the moment. "Thank you for not staying mad forever." She shook her head. "Anger's too heavy. I had to put it down if I wanted my hands free to build something." He nodded, wiping raindrops from his forehead. "You taught me that." Then he reached into his pocket and handed her a folded flyer, an invitation to his next foundation gala. "You better come," he said. "They keep asking if you real or rumor." She laughed, taking it. "I'll show up. Might even donate a check big enough to scare you." The gala came 2 weeks later. It was held at the City Museum. High ceilings, marble floors, jazz band glowing under amber light. Banners of the foundation's graduates lined the walls. Young men who had gone from headlines to college degrees. From probation to purpose. Kirk moved through the crowd in a tailored suit, shaking hands, smiling, making sure every success story got the spotlight. When Rasheeda walked in, conversations paused for a second. She wore a deep blue gown, simple and radiant. Kirk spotted her immediately. "You made it," he said. "Told you I would." They hugged briefly, the room erupting in applause. The city loved a reunion, but this one wasn't for spectacle, it was for peace. During the speeches, Kirk invited her to the stage unexpectedly. "This woman right here," he said into the mic, "taught me accountability before it was a hashtag. Every lesson these young brothers learn in this program has a little bit of her in it." She stepped forward, touched the microphone, and said, "We all learn eventually. Some of us just need louder mistakes to hear the truth." The room laughed softly. Their eyes met under the lights. No tension, no past to untangle, just mutual respect that filled the air thicker than applause. After the event, they stood outside near the museum steps, the night warm, the skyline blinking behind them. She looked at him. "You turned it around, Kirk." "Yeah," he said. "Guess we both did." They didn't linger. Good stories didn't need grand endings, just honest exits. He kissed her hand lightly before walking away, and she watched him disappear into the crowd, smiling to herself. The weeks rolled forward. Rasheeda's schedule filled with travel panels, interviews, business collaborations, but she made sure to carve out quiet mornings. Coffee on the patio, sunrise over the skyline, no phone, no noise. Sometimes she'd catch a radio segment of Kirk's voice while driving to meetings. He had a new partnership with local stations. Unlearn Lessons Live, short audio reflections on accountability. She always listened through to the end. even when she told herself she wouldn't. His tone had softened over time, almost meditative. One morning, the segment closed with, "Forgiveness don't always mean staying. Sometimes it means wishing them well from wherever you are." She smiled, rolling down the window to feel the wind. "He's still talking sense," she murmured. Their paths kept crossing in small, almost cinematic coincidences. An award dinner, a mutual friend's birthday, a city fundraiser. Every encounter felt smoother than the last. There was no unspoken tension anymore, just history resting quietly between them. At one event, a young journalist asked them to pose for a photo. Kirk looked at Rasheeda for approval. She nodded. The flash went off, capturing them mid. The image spread online that night under the caption, "Peace looks good on the frosts." She saw it later before bed, chuckled, and turned off her phone. Autumn again. Prest was expanding to new cities, and she had started writing her own book. Late nights, laptop open, tea growing cold beside her. The working title was What I Learned After the Noise. Some chapters hurt to write, others felt like release. In the acknowledgements she left a simple line. To Kirk, "Thank you for the lessons." She didn't tell him. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, Kirk began planning a documentary about his foundation stories of second chances, of how men rebuild their lives. Producers wanted to include pieces of his personal growth too. He agreed, on one condition: no pity, no scandal, just truth. During filming, they asked, "What kept you going when everyone counted you out?" He answered, "Someone had already seen the best in me once. I didn't want to waste that belief." He didn't say her name, but the director didn't need it. The sentiment filled the frame. One crisp Sunday morning, Rasheeda visited the old park by the lake, though, one where she used to walk during her hardest years. The air smelled of pine and rain. Families picnicked in the distance, laughter floating across the water. She sat on a bench, watching sunlight ripple across the surface. Her thoughts wandered through decades. The struggle, the spotlight, the silence afterward. Every version of her had been necessary, even the broken ones. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through messages, stopping at Kirk's contact. She hovered for a second, then typed, "Proud of what you've built. The city's better for it." She didn't expect a reply. 10 minutes later, the screen lit up. "Means a lot. Hope you keep building too. We did something good, didn't we?" She smiled and wrote back, "Yeah, we did." The breeze lifted strands of her hair, carrying the faint scent of water lilies. She leaned back, eyes closed, and whispered, "Thank you." Whether she was talking to God, to him, or to the past itself, even she didn't know, but it felt like the right thing to say. That evening, the sun dipped behind the skyline, and Atlanta glowed like a story still being written. In a quiet house on the west side, Kirk played one of Carter's new songs through his speakers, a slow track, layered with piano and soft drums. The chorus repeated, "Peace ain't weakness, it's proof you survived." He let it play twice, then texted his son, "You got your mama's heart." A reply came instantly, "And your lessons, Pops." He laughed quietly, turning the volume up. Elsewhere, in the city, Rasheeda drove home through the same rain-shimmered streets, where everything once began. The windshield reflected streaks of light billboards, headlights, neon from late-night diners. She felt calm, fully present, like the city itself was humming her story back to her. She passed the corner where the old Pressed store used to stand and caught herself smiling. Every step, every mistake, every heartbreak had led here to peace that didn't need witnesses. When she reached home, she turned off the car, sat for a moment, and whispered into the quiet, "We made it." The cameras fade in on the city, lights Atlanta glowing beneath a sky streaked with gold and gray. Traffic hums, people move, and somewhere in the quiet rhythm of it all, the Frost story breathes on. No explosions, no arguments, just the soft sound of life continuing. Rasheeda stands inside, Pressed, locking up for the night. The racks gleam, under the low light, reflections dancing against the window. She lingers for a moment, watching the glow of her own name shimmer across the glass. Outside, the rain has started again, light and familiar, like an old song. She smiles, whispers a small prayer of thanks, and steps into the night. Meanwhile, across town, Kirk closes the door to his studio. The air smells like coffee and sawdust, the faint echo of a piano still hanging in the room. He sits for a while, elbows on his knees, thinking about how strange it feels to be remembered not for mistakes but for growth. He doesn't need cameras anymore. He doesn't need to prove anything. For the first time in years, he's proud of silence. As the music swells, their stories play like parallel scenes. Rasheeda, driving home, her face illuminated by passing lights. Kirk walking through empty streets, his shadow stretching long across the pavement. Their voices overlap in soft narration, two halves of the same reflection. You learn, Rasheeda says, that love can't fix everything. It can guide you, it can shape you, but you still have to choose peace for yourself. And when you do, Kirk adds, you realize peace ain't the end of the story, it's the lesson. The screen fills with flashes of their journey, the early years, the heartbreak, the rebuilding, the moments that once trended across the world. But now the footage looks different, not scandal, not gossip, just two people who kept growing. The tone is calm, almost sacred. You can hear the weight of time in every breath. The music fades lower, replaced by the soft sound of rain on concrete. A narrator's voice, steady, familiar, takes over. Peace doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it's the courage to walk your own path and still wish the other person well. Sometimes it's choosing forgiveness even when no one's watching. And sometimes, the voice pauses, it's just silence, the kind that no longer hurts. The visuals cut to Rasheeda arriving home. She turns off her car, takes a deep breath, and looks up at the sky. Her phone buzzes with a new message from Kirk. Thank you for helping me find my way. She smiles, closes her eyes, and sends one final reply. Thank you for reminding me who I was meant to be. The camera holds on her face for a beat before pulling back, the city unfolding behind her like a painting. Then, slowly, Kirk's voice enters again. We used to think our story was about marriage, fame, money. Turns out it was about something quieter: growth, forgiveness, peace. We didn't just survive, we evolved. As he speaks, the visuals shift, flashes of the pressed storefront, the Frost Foundation, their sons on stage. Atlanta kids wearing the brand they helped build. It's not nostalgia, it's legacy. The scene transitions to daylight. Rasheeda hosts a mentorship event. She laughs with her students, guiding them through fabric samples and sketches. Kirk mentors a group of boys at his foundation, listening as they talk about family and responsibility. Both spaces are filled with light, both filled with the same calm determination. The narrator continues. They stopped trying to rewrite the past and started shaping the future. What they built now carries more weight than anything they ever lost, because peace doesn't fade, it multiplies. The final montage begins low and cinematic. Rasheeda walking through her store, Kirk shaking hands with young men, their sons performing on stage, their mother smiling from her porch. No drama, no spectacle, just moments stitched together like quiet proof that healing can outlast heartbreak. As the music rises, the narration turns to the viewer, soft but direct. Maybe that's the message for all of us watching. Maybe the lesson isn't about who stayed or who left. Maybe it's about what you become after everything falls apart. Maybe peace is the real happily ever after. Rasheeda's voice returns, warm and certain. Don't chase noise. Build something that still stands when the noise fades. Kirk's voice joins hers. Don't be afraid to grow out loud, even if the world watches you make mistakes. Because real growth, real love isn't about perfection. It's about becoming better, one honest day at a time. The two voices fade into music as the screen cuts to black for a moment, then reopens with their final joint scene standing together at a community event, cameras flashing, both smiling easily. The crowd cheers, but they don't pose. They just look at each other and nod, like they've both found something deeper than applause. The closing narration speaks over slow shots of the city skyline. This was never just a love story. It was a lesson in becoming whole. From chaos to calm, from noise to grace. They showed that forgiveness is strength, not weakness, and that peace, once earned, is a legacy that never dies. As the music swells, text fades across the screen. Choose peace, build legacy, tell your story. The narrator's voice grows more personal now, addressing the audience directly. If you watched this far, maybe something in their journey feels familiar. Maybe you've carried your own hurt, your own unfinished story. Let this be your reminder, you can start over. You can grow past the pain. And when you do, don't keep it quiet, share it. Talk about healing. Talk about the lessons you learned when nobody was clapping. That's how peace spreads. The beat softens, the rain outside slows, and the camera drifts upward across the city lights, across the quiet neighborhoods, across every small piece of Atlanta that still holds their name. Rasheeda's last words echo faintly. Every ending can be a new beginning if you make peace with what came before. Kirk's final line closes it all. We're proof that love doesn't have to last forever to matter forever. The screen fades to black, the music lingers, and the text appears. Thank you for watching. If their story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your own thoughts below. What does peace mean to you? A final swell of strings, a breath of silence, and then the sound of Atlanta rain fading into the distance. The story ends not with a goodbye, but with calm. The kind that tells you everything broken found its shape again. The kind that makes you whisper, almost without realizing, they made it. And somewhere, under that quiet city sky, the Frost name rests easy, no longer a headline, just a heartbeat. And so, their story, once filled with chaos, love, mistakes, and redemption, ended not with reunion or regret but with understanding. Their love had changed shape, but it hadn't died. It had simply matured into something quieter, something enduring: respect, forgiveness, peace. The camera that once followed them would have found no tears now, no shouting, no cliffhanger. Just a woman sipping her tea in the golden light of her success, and a man sitting in calm reflection, proud of the peace they had both earned. If Atlanta could speak, it would say they grew up together. And maybe that was the real story all along, not the scandals, not the ratings, not the gossip, but to people who learned that love doesn't always have to last forever to leave a legacy that does. And when the sun finally set on the Frost story, it wasn't tragedy that lingered, it was grace.